About 35 years ago, a wonderful textile and felt artist, Judith, invented her own unique way of making these beautiful, delicate roses. Now, Judith has given me her notes. Is it possible for me to use these notes and make a rose of my own? Will I get it right? Let's see if I can. We're going to need some wool, not too much, there's enough here for about 5 roses. One of these metal tubes, a thin plastic shopping bag, some scissors, some rubber bands, some sort of skewer that has a pointy end, a foot off an old stocking, some dishwashing detergent, a shaker, has to be big enough to take the metal tube, that's all, a little bit of PVA glue. First, let's prepare the wool. We want the wool to be as light and airy as possible. So I'm going to tease it out. Here I'm using a dog comb. You can also just get stuck in with your fingers. This technique I'm using here is what we'll use to lay down our roses. This is the wool top, the red wool top. I'm just separating it out with my hands. And again, that's fine now. Let's prepare the plastic bag. We call it a resist. First of all, cut off the bottom of the bag. Spread it out, smooth it out. Measure up one side of the bag, the length of the metal tube, and cut it. Only on one side of the bag though. When you've done that, fold the bag in half. Smooth it out again. Once more, using the metal tube, we're going to cut a strip off the bottom of the bag that is as high as that metal tube. This is a very rough measurement. That's why I'm doing it so roughly. We end up with a lovely piece that is 15 centimeters by 98 centimeters. We're going to add a tiny amount of dishwashing liquid. I suggest you use much less than I have here. We only put it on one half of the bag, fold the strip again in half, and we spend some time here smoothing out because we're trying to spread out all of that detergent across the whole strip of the plastic. Now for laying out the rose, about 1 hand span in from the edge, we start to lay down our leaves. You don't have to do leaves. I just like them. I like the contrast of the green and the red as well. You'll notice that I'm putting in some other colours and that I've gone past the edge of the plastic. That's very deliberate. You need to do that. I'm leaving a tiny space between the leaves. Next, I'm laying out some fine wool merino that is white. It gives a good background and helps to act as a contrast for your work. Now comes some pinks. I've got pinks, purples, some oranges that I've kind of mixed together. You might be wondering if there's ever going to be any red in this red rose. There will be. This is very sped up, this process. Really take your time over it and enjoy. It's very meditative. Not all of the wool has to come over the edge, just enough. So now you can see I'm laying out the petals. So next to the leaves comes the outside petals of the rose. You just have to trust me with this, it is going to work. As we come along the strip, you'll see that I'm using a little bit less in height. That's deliberate because they're going to be the center of the rose. And finally, I'm going to add some darks into what will be the inside of the rose. This is to give an impression of a shadow. Now, if this next rose doesn't look like the same rose, you're right, it's not. I made a mistake and wrapped it up from the wrong end. So here we go. Can I get it right this time? Now I'm sprinkling some water on this just to start that wetting process, but you'll notice I didn't touch it. Just sprinkle the water. Keep your hands off. Now we start rolling in. I've left a bit of space at the end as well, you'll see. And I start rolling it in with the end of the tube a bit past the end of the plastic. So all that stuff that is standing out from the bottom, that's going to form the connection of all of the petals. Now we get into felting. So with my fingers, I'm wetting down this end bit and I'm massaging this wool very gently. That's taken me about 5 minutes to do that. You can see it's already starting to love itself and get felting. So just using a glass of water that is hot but not too hot, definitely not boiling, comfortable to handle but warm, I continue to felt the bottom of the tube. Next I get a stocking, put the whole lot in the stocking and tie a knot in it. Now I put the rubber bands on and I put those below, above, whatever we want to call it, of where our petals and leaves started. So below those rubber bands there's no wool. You can see it's fatter in the top half. Here comes the work. We need quite a few hours of rolling, resting between, rolling, smacking, banging, tumbling. Agitation is what makes things felt. The aim with these roses is not to felt them too much. In fact, we want to underfelt them. We're not making shoes. We're not making pot holders. We're making something that is very, very light and delicate. And we are felting those wool layers through all the layers of plastic. So it's quite a challenge. Feel free to leave it overnight. When you get sick of doing all that rolling and rubbing, you can put it in the shaker. You see all the soap coming out. I've only just put that in there. This is quite good to do while you're watching the TV. Might annoy other people, but it gets it felted. The slow reveal. I'm taking the rose out of the stocking. Look how well it was attached to that stocking. That end of the rose is well and truly felted. See how fluffy it is? So felted. That part will be the part that is best felted at the moment. Here we go. It's a little bit like undoing a present. And here come the leaves, first of all. So you'll soon see why we're using the skewer. So we take the skewer and just very, very gently with the sharp end of the skewer, so gentle. See how it's felted kind of a little bit, but not so that it's thick. What we're going to do next is going to continue the felting process. Now, as I pull this down with the skewer, you'll see that the second leaf is kind of connected to the first leaf. So I'll get my scissors and make a little cut there. The shapes are what you would call very organic, with no straight lines, so cutting it seems an odd thing to do, but it isn't. I will massage each section with my fingers to maintain that organic look. Leaf-like, in fact. So you're starting to see how this is going to work. Everything is connected at the base. So we twist it a little bit more. And now we have a little bit of a leaf, but we also have it connected to the first petal. So I'm going to cut along the edge of the petal. It's connecting it to the leaf. And it's okay to have those little bits of red on the leaves. See how effective they are? And as red and green are complementary colours, that works really well. There we have it. So we keep going. So that white colour I put in hasn't blended in completely. But when you're looking at the rose from a little bit of a distance, it does give the lightness. Now you can either roll your petals in or outwards. If you roll them in, the rough edges are kind of tucked very neatly inside. So it's a neater rose. So decide whether you want a neater rose and a very tidy one, or whether you'd like it to be a little bit loose. And this is not what the finished product looks like either, by the way. We've got a long way to go yet. So as we go down, I continue just pulling this down with the skewer. Very, very gently. Just trying to create each of the petals. And you may have noticed that the petals on the outside of the rose I made deeper in the original line. They've got more wool on them. And as we move into the center, see this one, I'm going to start tucking it in. So this row of petals can be tucked behind the outside one. See, I can tuck them one way, or I can tuck them inside like that. And you can start to see the darker reds on the inside there. And we just keep turning it and bringing it down. I do hope you'll try one of these for yourself. Please subscribe if you like this video, and I hope you do. I'd really appreciate your support. Now, as I said, we're nowhere near done. We've got a lot of work to do yet. But you could do very little and it will still read as a very effective rose. And we are at the center. Now we've got to get the metal tube out. This can be tricky. Uh-oh, the lid's stuck inside. I think I'm going to have to use quite a bit of force to get this out. And I'm pulling and pulling. It's well connected inside there. Looks like I'm screwing up the rose, and I am, but the rose is quite safe. Quite safe. There we are. Done. Look at all that lovely darkness inside the rose. That's going to create our shadow. And you can see as well there's an awful lot of soap left in this. So now I'm just twirling to create those very inside petals of the rose. Lifting them up a little bit with my thumb and forefinger as we go, and then pulling the outside petals out so there's more room for the rose. See, it kind of evolves before your very eyes. Now we start to do some cutting, because I made these petals way too big. Or either that, or in the felting process they've joined up their edges. So I can stretch this, because it is under felted, I can stretch it. So by stretching the middle of a petal, it makes that bit fatter. And just by very gently touching it with my fingers, I'm going to massage it and felt it a little bit more. The felting process has already begun, so it keeps going very easily and readily. So we just pull. So we can make quite a bit of difference to the size of a petal. And I'm just rolling those edges under. All those fluffy bits on the outside, later on I can trim those off if I want to. There's so much soap in this. When you make yours, please don't use so much soap. Using too much soap can actually hinder the felting process, because the wool fibres just slide past each other too easily instead of grabbing on. So there is the base of the rose. See how smooth that is? And there it is at this stage, starting to look like a rose. So I take the leaves and I start to just rub a little bit on the edges. Now, because this had so much soap in it, this is something weird I have never done before. Definitely gone off script. I decided to get rid of some of that soap. So I just got a bowl of water. Now this looks, after that very delicate process, it looks like this would be wrecking it. But it doesn't. Not a bit. Not at all. And now that I've got that water out, I hope you can see just how I've actually got some more soap here on these petals, but I'm just being very, very gentle. Think of it like washing a baby's skin. Hardly any pressure at all. Just very, very gently patting it. Like you'd use if you were putting makeup on your face. Not rubbing hard, just rubbing gently, and you will feel the rose start to felt under your fingertips. This is sculpting in every way, in every sense of the term. You can make this rose as tight or as loose as you want it to be. And there's still a lot of soap in here. There's that lovely dark interior. I'm sure you can see now why I use some of the white wool and why I use some real darks in the centre. It does give us that three-dimensional sense of a rose with a dark interior. It's 38 degrees here in Australia today, so our roses are looking very pale on their outside petals, just like this, all bleached out from the sun. So you see, we just take our time and keep working on it. Just to give those leaves a little bit more substance, I've sort of twirled them together with my fingertips. And here we have a finished rose. But we're still not done. Finally, adding a little stiffening to the petals and leaves. I use this craft glue. I call it a PVA glue. It's sort of plasticky and thick and white. So I'll put a little bit. No, that's not a little bit. You can see a trend here, can't you? So I'm going to water that down, dilute that a lot more. So I get a paintbrush, this very diluted glue. This rose, by the way, has now dried overnight. And this just acts as a beautiful stiffener, so that if you make this into a brooch, the petals and the leaves will hold their shape. It is water soluble, so if you were to get it wet or wet it, that would go a bit limp again. And you'll see in a minute what I'm going to do is use some supports around the rows so that as it dries, the petals dry away from each other. So this works quite well, having a little board like this that you can just turn around and just keep putting a little bit more in. If you like, you can do this all at once, or you might like to do it in stages, where you do a very thin layer of the glue, let it dry, see how that feels, what it looks like, and then do another layer if you want to. See how those bottom petals are sort of a bit limp and hanging down? Well, in a minute we're going to do something to give them a lift and a bit of a curve. So taking the end of the paintbrush, just give it set its hair, like curling hair, twirl it around the paintbrush, and then see if that will stay still. I think it probably will. And we do another one. And see if that will stay still. Same with the leaves. Let's give them a little bit of shape. There you are. Lovely little salt cellar, I think it is, that I found buried in my backyard. I have to see if there's any more treasures in the backyard. So just trying to give it a little bit of a more three-dimensional feel to it. I do hope you're enjoying this video. Now I'm also going to do this video again in sections so I can add even more detail. And there we have it. One wet felted rose. So did I get it right? Was I able to follow Judith's instructions? I think so. And I think even though I made lots of mistakes along the way, I think she would be very pleased with the results. We'll see when I show her. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. See you next time.